In this video, I'm going to show you the process that I use for creating these simple symmetrical rings. The materials that I've set aside for this project are 2.5 feet of 22 gauge half round, 4 segments of 5.5 inch long 21 gauge square, 2 segments of 2 feet of 26 gauge round, as well as this oval cab to set into the ring. My first step is going to be to take my half round, bring both edges or both ends together, slide down till I find the center of the half round, pinch it so that I can work from the dead center of the wire. Next, I'm going to take my 4 squares, and if I hold them firmly at one end, I can run them through my fingers to make sure that they sit nice and flat next to each other. Once I've done that, I'm going to slide the loop of our half round over our squares and wrap it once around each side, and then pinch it flat to make sure that those wires sit nice and flush inside this coil. My next move is to slide my half round until it's in the dead center of my section of squares, just so that I have equal working distance on both sides. Once the half round is in the center of what will become our ring band, I'm going to go ahead and coil around both sides. I like to do this in sections so that I can keep track of making sure I have equal working distance with the squares when I get to the end. I went ahead and coiled 60 times around my side on the right here. I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the other side. Once I reach the desired length, I can go ahead and cut both of my half round short and pinch the ending flush down on top of our squares. Once our ring band is complete, we can wrap it around the mandrel. I'm looking for about the width of the stone distance between the two endings of my coil. From here I want to take my wires and divide them in half, bending first the outermost wires and then the second wire. I do still want to make sure that as I do this, the squares still run flush next to each other. Setting our shank off to the side, I want to take my first section of 26 gauge round, bringing the ends together and sliding down till I find the center point. I want to repeat the same process for the second piece, bringing those endings together, finding the center of the wire. Next, I'm going to take my half round pliers and bend my squares in towards each other so that once again these squares should be flat next to each other. I'll just want to push them together so I can begin to weave between them. This is about the working shape that I'll start off with. I'm going to take that 26 gauge and slide it over both squares, wrapping it once around each side to where I can begin a figure 8 weave between the two sections of squares. I'm going to pass through probably 2 times before switching to the other side. That way I can make sure that I'm working evenly. To do this weave with 2 wire endings instead of 1, I'm going to take the one from the left over the top of the squares, down in between, wrap once around my squares on the left, and then switch to my lower wire, going down in between my 2 sections of square. I should pass just below the wire we just brought across, going around my wires on the left, crossing back over to the right, and then switching again to the lower wire, going across, coiling around the wires on the left. From here I can go ahead and pinch the weave flat just to make sure that it all sits flush. Slide it as close to the ring shank as I can manage, and repeat the same process on the other side. One more time. To start that, I am sliding my 26 gauge over both sections of square and wrapping 1 time around each. And then starting with my left, I'm going to go in between the 2 sections of square and around the right, switch to the lower wire, pass underneath that coil, and down to the center in between the 2 sections of square, once around the left, back over to the right, and then grabbing the lower wire, again making sure that I pass underneath the coil of the wire we just brought over, through the center, around to the left. I'm going to flatten it and slide it as close to the ring shank as possible. From here we can see where the stone will sit. My cap will actually sit directly on the cross section of those wires. It'll be open from the back, so it'll actually look like it's almost floating in the ring. I'm going to go ahead and cross between both of these weaves 2 more times. So taking my wire from the left across to the right, and then bringing the right wire across to the left, around both of the left squares, and then back down to the right, and then passing that left wire back to where it started. Going to do the same on the other side. From here, I'm going to coil around each of my section of squares separately 5 times with its respective 26 gauge round. From here I'm going to reform the ring to a round shape by sliding it on my mandrel both directions. Next I'm going to go ahead and bend 90 degrees into both sections of our square. It should be just the width of our stone. I'm going to go ahead and coil around each section of square 5 more times. Once I've completed that for all 4 sections, I should have 10 coils around each section of square passed from where we last wove them together. I want to go ahead and prepare the right and the left 2 sections of wire to be connected back together with a weave before finishing on the ring shank. I'm going to bend them out to either side. Double check the fit of my stone. I can hold my stone in place with my thumb and form our 2 sections of square more or less into the place that they'll be sitting. Once I have all 4 wire sections formed, I'm going to weave them back together. I'm going to start with my left wire, just like at the beginning, bringing it across to its square counterpart, and switching to the lower wire, bringing it up in between, and once around the left wires, and then back to its original place on the right, and then doing the same with the other. Once I have both wires back in their original positions, I'm going to switch to the other side and do the same. Starting with my left wire, bringing it across, switching to the lower wire on the right, bringing it up in between my 2 sections of square and across to the other side, and then passing back to its original position on the right, and bringing my left, or the lower wire, back to its original position on the left. should look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and cross between one more time for each of our wires, and then move on to the next step. Starting with one side, I'm going to go ahead and take the outermost wire on both sides, bend it 90 degrees out to either side of the ring shank. From here, I'm going to continue our figure-8 weave between my two squares in the same way that I have been so far. For 3 rotations between. So once my original wire is back to its original position, I'm going to wrap one extra time around each square, bring it across, cut it short so that my wire ending will be tucked up underneath these squares. Do the same on the other side. Now, to switch back to the other side of the ring and repeat the same process. Once I've repeated the same process on the other side, I'm ready to connect both endings down and finish the ring. Even without being secured down onto the ring shank, your stone should be fairly stable at this point. It shouldn't wiggle or move. To connect the sides, I'm going to take first our lower squares that are sticking out at a 90-degree angle, bring them all the way through the ring shank, making sure that their flat edge of the square wire is sitting up underneath the ring shank so that it doesn't create like a uncomfortable ridge on the inside of the ring. I then want to go ahead and trim them short. And tuck both wire endings up, around, and flat into the top of the ring shank. I'm going to repeat the same process on the opposite side, just to make sure that my stone is being secured evenly. Again, making sure when my squares pass under to the inside of the ring shank, that the flat side is down. Then I can go ahead and trim them short and flatten them up onto the top of the ring. To finish, I'm going to take my last two squares on either side, bending them 90 degrees out to either edge, just after where the weave ends, and securing them around the shank of the ring. Now that that side is secured, I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. And here we have the finished ring. As always, a huge thank you goes out to those who are already supporting the channel through Patreon. If you're interested in helping support what I'm doing here, check out the link to my Patreon in the description of this video.